strategy management. Therefore, we need to understand some of the basic concepts related to the strategic change and how the role of leadership is very much prominent in terms of the strategic management. We will also discuss in this unit about the concept of leadership and various functions of leaders, and some of the leading leadership styles will also be referred, and the important or the importance of ethics and values will also be covered under this unit. So let's start with the discussion on the strategic change. Whenever a corporate or a business entity try to develop the strategy, then it need to visualize a broader horizon in terms of the different processes, tasks, large number of employees, and the rival's position as well. So in that particular case, how that strategy is going to implement is the major concern for the managers. So in this particular case, each organization has a very independent working style, and it varies from one organization to other organization, and therefore strategic formulation is one part, but at the same time its implementation is again very core aspect that one need to understand. Therefore, the strategy implementation process involves a large number of people, tasks, business units, and products to move from a stable strategy to the organizational redirection. Hence, this requires a lot of efforts and implementation process, which is quite complex in the present context. Therefore, if we just try to refer this strategic change, then it becomes important, crucial for the perspective of the management in terms of adapting to the changing times and manage the strategic change. Here, we need to refer three major answers that is something aligned with a very particular question which one need to somewhere address in terms of a specific question which is required in terms of the organizational structure when we try to match it with the kind of strategy being formulated. And that question is something that how to match the structure to the needs of the strategy which has been formulated. So just to answer it, we are having three major type of thoughts, or three major sources or the aspects that need to be answered. First is the critical activities pertaining to the strategy. Second is the degree of authority. Sometimes we also call it as the decentralization. And the last aspect for consideration of this question is in terms of providing for the coordination. So we will study each of these aspects bit detail so that it can give you a better understanding in terms of the implementation process. So the first is the critical activities, which is basically two type of major activities have been identified from the corporate perspective. One is the critical activities, where the critical task and the functions which must be critically examined and re-examined are considered as a part of critical activities. And as an example, if we try to refer, then from the cost perspective, where the low cost leadership is being referred in terms of the strategy, then in that particular case, the tight cost control is the aspect which need to be addressed. And if we refer the other type of activities, then it is something the routine activities, where it is more of a maintenance in nature, more of a supportive type of activities which can be considered. And as an example, we can consider lot many activities under routine activities, like handling payrolls, accounting, complying with regulations, managing cash flows, maybe different controlling inventories and safekeeping of stores, maybe the kind of training of manpower, public relations, market research, and maybe many more. Now, if we need to refer this critical activities, then there are two other questions that one need to answer. And before we answer them, we need to have a perception that what kind of these questions need to be answered through these critical activities. So first question arises that what functions have to be performed exceedingly well for the strategy to succeed in advance. The second question arises that what are the areas where less than satisfactory performance would seriously endanger the success of strategy. In this particular case, the second aspect of the strategy is to be referred as the degree of authority, which we are talking about in terms of the decentralization, where two different approaches are referred. One is the centralization approach, and another is the decentralization approach. In the case of the centralization approach, uh, from the perspective of the degree of authority, the strategic decision making authority is at the corporate level, that is at the higher level, and they simply delegate only the operating decisions to the unit managers or to the functional units. But if we compare the other aspect, that is of the decentralization, so in that case it is a bit different. In that particular case of the decentralization, it is substantially decentralizing the strategic decisions to the unit managers rather than at the corporate level. Here, the corporate staff provides the necessary support to the functional units, and the corporate office may limit its role to certain kinds of prominent strategic decisions only. Now, when we refer the centralization or the decentralization aspect, then there are certain consideration to it, and that is in terms of the what degree of authority need to be considered before applying to either the centralization or the decentralization. So in that case, for few aspects one need to consider as a strategic manager. First is say, is it essentially a question of managerial judgment and would depend upon a number of factors. The merits and demerits of decentralization in each situation must be properly weighted. So, depending on a specific strategy or the kind of emphasis the organization or the strategic management is being referred, need to emphasize, need to understand that to what extent the centralization will help and to what extent the decentralization can be a better option. And therefore, after taking into consideration the principal decision the business unit managers make and the kind of corporate management perceives the importance of the various units in the overall strategy of the organization. Apart from that, we also need to refer the third aspect of the strategic perspective, that is providing for the coordination, where three major aspects are there. First, the principal way is to position the various activities in the vertical hierarchy of authority. Therefore, the managers higher up in the hierarchy generally have to broaden the authority over several organizational units, and this enables them to have more power to coordinate, integrate, or arrange for the coordination of the units under their supervision. In this particular case, you will also notice that as far as the business units are concerned, the general manager are the central points in coordination because of their position of authority over the whole unit. Further, when we refer the positioning organizational units along vertical scale of managerial authority, a general manager can also achieve coordination of strategic efforts through informal meetings, special task forces, standing committees, maybe 6 monthly or quarterly strategic planning, budgeting and review meetings, and reports. Last but not the least, in this particular case of providing for the coordination, While formulating the strategic plan, itself a general manager can solicit the cooperation of other general managers in the planning process, and this would provide for inbuilt coordination bridges right from the very beginning for strategic perspective. Now we have discussed the strategic change. Now based on it, we now need to refer the concept of leadership, because it has a very prominent role in terms of the strategic management. And here the leadership has been defined by Morin in 1984, which says that leadership is the capacity to frame plans which will succeed, and the faculty to pursue others to carry them out in the face of all difficulties. Here, three major functions or the broader functions of leadership has been identified from the perspective of the effective strategic management. One is one function of leadership is towards the functions for needs of task, which basically consider the aspect related to mission, objectives, or the goal, where aspects related to defining the task, maybe making the plans, and allocating work and resources to, to a specific person or the units is considered. And after that, controlling quality of work is also ensured as a part of the functions of needs of, for the task. And a last aspect in this particular function is that checking performance against a plan, maybe some sort of standard need to be ensured. The second broader function of leadership under strategic management from the perspective of needs of the individual is considered, where broadly speaking, major five aspects are considered as the major functions. One is attending to personal problems of the individuals, praising of individuals whenever required, whenever such kind of instance happen, knowing individuals personally, recognizing and using individual abilities, and training individuals. And the third broader category of functions of leadership is in terms of needs of the group, where the standard setting is ensured. Subsequently, maintaining discipline is referred. Then, building team spirit is also considered as an important function of leadership here. Then, the aspect of encouraging, maybe motivating, and giving a sense of purpose and sense of responsibility is considered as an important function of the leadership. Then, appointing sub leaders or encouraging other leaders, sub leaders in place of the core leaders is also identified as an important aspect. Then, ensuring communication within the group and training to the group is important functions of the leadership. When we refer the important leadership styles, then there are n number of leadership styles which may be mix of nature and mix of circumstances which can define to a specific type of leadership style. Like broadly speaking, three major leadership styles are seen, observed. One is, say, autocratic, or sometimes we call it the authoritative leadership. The other type of leadership very commonly seen in the organization is the laissez-faire or the delegative leadership. And third is the kind of bureaucratic leadership. So we will be talking about some of the prominent one. So in this particular case of leadership styles, no effective leader ever consciously adopts a specific style. It comes naturally from within, and therefore it need to develop. It need to have a sense of responsibility and the present circumstances under which a leader can deliver or can refer to a specific type of style of leadership in order to refer to a particular situation. And here, any change in style is merely an intuitive variation in the mix of personal example, persuasion, and compulsion. So, broadly speaking, three major or leading leadership styles can be referred. One is the autocratic, which sometime as an example refer like do this. I mean, a kind of orders is placed rather than. So, in this particular case, the managers uh, give the orders and they make the decisions, but at the same time, the subordinates or the employees have to follow. They don't intervene and they don't give kind of suggestions, although it is not accepted as well. So, in fact, it is ignored, or in fact, the ideas or the suggestions of the employees or the subordinates are not at all considered. The other type, which is bit liberal leadership style, is laissez-faire. In that particular case, the employees make decisions and the managers make minimum interference, and they guide from the management is bit very less. And here more of a liberty lies with the employees. But when we refer the third type of leadership style, it is a democratic style of leadership where the group makes decisions, means the employees make a decision based on the majority, where it is a kind of situation where almost all the persons in the team or all employees are encouraged to make some contribution, and their ideas of the employees are considered for the purpose of a specific type of decision. Now, when we refer to the leadership style, we also need to understand the concept of corporate culture, because the corporate culture is one such contribution towards the values and beliefs which is accepted and practiced by all the employees of the organization. And therefore, if the values and belief are something which is adopted or something acceptable, so which ultimately defines the level of corporate culture. It can be a strong corporate culture, but at the same time, the reverse of that is weak corporate culture, where if the employees have strong commitment towards the organizations or the organization goals, then such type of organizations or the corporate culture is termed as the corporate culture. But the reverse of that, where the commitment of the employees is not that strong towards the organization or the organization goal. So that lead to a kind of weak corporate culture. We now also need to understand the concept of ethics and values, because the moment we talk about the implementation of the strategy, it need to be derived, it need to be addressed through these two aspects, which or to what extent these aspects are being referred in an organization, maybe organization point of view or maybe as an individual point of view. So the strong culture is somewhere based on strong ethics and the value system of an organization and the individuals within that organization. Here, the ethics is the moral philosophy of the organization, and on the other hand, the values are the moral principles of the organization. And therefore, when we club these two, then ethics and values ensures or somewhere signifies that the organization does not adopt short-term methods or shortcut methods to achieve success. Instead, the such kind of organizations who perceive or who believe in ethics and values will stress upon more and more on the sustained or sustainable aspect, which is somewhere giving a kind of a higher success to such kind of organization. And in this particular case, every organization has its own code and code of conduct or maybe code of ethics and standards. And commonly it is seen that it is in written form. Now, when we refer ethics and values, then it commonly refers or it commonly contains some of the code. That could be somewhere addressing the kind of honesty. It can also refer to the kind of fairness in practices of the organization, which somewhere addresses the disclosing the inside information. Obviously, it is not the confidential information, but for the purpose of the external parties, just to make it more integral part, these disclosures uh, can be made part of the code of ethics. The third aspect, which can be contained under the head of code of ethics, is acquiring and using outside information for disclosure of outside activities by the employer to the employee. The other aspect that can also be covered under code of ethics is the using organizational assets. Now, we also need to refer the value statement very commonly the organizations include. It can be value of customers, it can be the commitment towards the business practices like the quality aspect, and it can also be the kind of duty towards shareholders, suppliers, customers, or maybe some other parties, some other important stakeholders too. And the following the environmental protection norms, etc., can also be the part of the value statement of the organization. Now, since we have referred some of the aspects towards the implementation aspect of the strategy, now we also need to address the corporate governance, which is a kind of major pillars or a kind of significant aspects which somewhere defines the governance mechanism or the leadership aspects that the corporate are required to adopt. So in that particular case, in this unit 11, we will be referring a kind of understanding towards the corporate governance and the ethics from the perspective of business, that is business ethics. Then five pillars of corporate governance, that is accountability, integrity, fairness, social responsibility, will also be discussed in this unit. And we will also refer to some of the drivers which guide the corporate governance to be adopted in the corporates. And some of the prominent models which are commonly seen and observed in different countries will also be discussed in this unit. So let us first understand the concept of corporate governance. Here, corporate governance is essentially concerned with the process by which organizations are governed and managed. Here, one need to make a difference between the administration, management, and governance. All these terms are different from each other. Therefore, today we have to understand governance aspect from the perspective of the corporate governance model. So, the corporate governance is also considered as a set of standards, maybe aims to improve the organization's image in the external market, and maybe in terms of improving the efficiency or the effectiveness and maybe the social responsibility of the organization. Corporate governance primarily relies on complete transparency, integrity, accountability of the management with an increasingly higher focus on investor protection and public interest. So, Sir Adrian Cadbury has defined this corporate governance in 1992 in its report, which is also very famous by name of Cadbury Committee Report 1992. According to that, the corporate governance is a system by which organizations are directed and controlled. In this continuation, we also need to understand the business ethics before we proceed for the five major pillars of the corporate governance. Here, the ethics demarcates between the right and the wrong. Therefore, if the ethics and the values is somewhere referred by an individual and the top position holders or the top management in an organizations, then one can easily identify and comply to the different business ethics practices, and where the moral values and certain codes of conduct which are presumed to be followed by an individual as well as an organization can be somewhere adopted as a effective business ethics practices in an organization. In this particular case, the business ethics is the application of ethical principles in a business organization. These are those five pillars that I was talking about. So, the first pillar of the corporate governance is the accountability aspect, which need to be referred at all the levels of the organization, whether it is at the top level, whether it is at the middle level, or at the lower level. So, all the personals, whether management or the subordinate, have to be accountable towards what has been asked them to do. The second is the fairness. The fairness is in terms of the others, that is, by way of treating each and every person equally without considering any discrimination or any demarcation. The third pillar is again very important from the perspective of developing a kind of stability is the transparency. Here, it means disclosing the relevant information for credibility point of view. The moment we are saying the disclosure or disclosure norms, it means to the extent a specific information, if brought towards the into the public domain or into the domain of the important stakeholders of the corporate. So from that perspective, this transparency pillar is very important. The other fourth pillar of corporate governance is the integrity aspect. It is from the perspective that the based on the professional culture or through the professional culture, it helps that each employees to perform towards his best and they can give the best to the organization. The last pillar of the corporate governance is the social responsibility, which can also be seen from the perspective that Companies Act 2013 under section 135 has also referred it a important aspect that corporate social responsibilities has been defined, and under that the corporates have to make some spending somewhere around 2% of their average net profit of last 3 years towards the social sectors. Around 13 such sectors, areas, or uh, defined fields have been earmarked under which the corporates can make the spending or they can perform their corporate social responsibility. And it is ultimately for the benefit of the society and the organization too. Now, we need to refer the models of corporate governance because different countries, different organizations can have different set of practices and models that they are adopting or referring in terms of the corporate structure or maybe in terms of the significant procedures that they are referring to. But primarily here, the board structure and the corporate governance related practices is the prime objective to understand a specific type of model. So, the corporate governance models means a kind of corporate form of business in terms of their composition and mechanism of appointing of board of directors and the board members and their functioning. When we refer the models of corporate governance, then different countries have adopted different set of corporate governance models. And this is something which is derived based on some sort of regulations or maybe code. And according to that, somewhere 5 to 6 major models of corporate governance have been identified. One is, say, Canadian model, another is Anglo-American model, UK model, third is German model, fourth Japanese model, and the Indian model, which is a mix of Anglo-American model and the Japanese model with some more features that we are going to understand. So the first model that we are referring here is the Anglo-American model of corporate governance, which is somewhere addressing or emphasizing on the shareholder. Therefore, considering the importance of the shareholder, it is also referred as the shareholders oriented model. In this particular case, through the visual, you can see that the company is having a direct control by the shareholders. And how it is happening? The shareholders are appointing or nominating the board of directors. So the board of directors are the representation or having the representation of the shareholders, where the board of directors are into the supervisory roles and they subsequently appoints the or in fact supervises the other officers whom we are considering as the managers. And these managers are the functionaries who manages the company, who manages the corporate. In this particular model, you will also see that the other important stakeholders, maybe it is the creditors, they provide the fund to the company, and the major ownership lies with the shareholders only. Apart from that, the other stakeholders may be there who are referring the company and who may be referring the company from different point of view. But at the same time, the legal system of that particular country is something governed or something regulating that organization from a specific regulation. So in this particular model, some of the salient feature is that it is the basis that which is very commonly seen in the case of Britain, Canada, America, Australia, and Commonwealth countries, including India. In this model, you will observe that shareholders' rights are recognized and given prime importance over others. The shareholders have right to elect all the members of the board. Apart from that, board directs the management. Board directs the management of the company, and the directors are rarely independent of management. And companies are run by professional management managers who have a negligible ownership stake. The other aspect in the case of Anglo-American model of corporate governance is that they have the clear separation of ownership and the management. Apart from that, the institutional investors like the banks and mutual funds are portfolio investors. And when they are not satisfied with the company's performance, they simply sell their shares in the market and quit. And that is a kind of indication where the other portfolio investors or the mutual fund try to observe the performance of the companies and the relative relation of the corporate governance and the performance of the company. It also refers to the disclosure norms, which are comprehensive, and rules against the insider trading, which are very rigorous and tight. The small investors are having the protection in this model, and the large investors are discouraged to take active role in corporate governance. When we refer the other major important corporate governance model, then it is a German model. Through the visual, you can easily see that two major parties are there. One is the shareholders who are also the owners of the company, but at the same time, the employees and labor unions of that company also plays an important role in terms of appointing the supervisory board, which is the top authority in such kind of corporates. And somewhere the shareholders and employees and labor unions are having equal weightage in terms of appointing the board of directors in the supervisory board. And these supervisory board members subsequently appoints and supervises the management board, which used to refer the affairs of the company. And in return, the management board report back to the supervisory board. And in this particular case, the management board also has a representation of the employees and labor union by way of labor relation officer. So, in the case of German model of corporate governance, workers are considered important stakeholders in the company, and they are having the right to participate in the management of the company. Corporate governance is carried out through two boards. Therefore, it is also known as two-tier board model. The first board is supervisory board. The shareholders elect the members of supervisory board. Employees also elect their representative for supervisory board, which are very commonly 50% in both the cases. The other board is board of management or the management board. The supervisory board appoints and monitors the management board. The supervisory board has the right to dismiss the management board and reconstitute the same. The third type of model of corporate governance is the Japanese model. In this case, in addition to the role of the shareholders, who are commonly known as the owner of the company, the role of the main bank who provide the funds, who provide the capital to the company is again very important. So two major parties are there. One is the shareholders and another is the main bank. So in this particular case, the higher authority or at the top of the organization is the supervisory board, which include the president, and it is appointed, I mean, the supervisory board is appointed by both, that is by the shareholders as well as by the intervention of the main bank. In this particular case, the main bank of the Japan are the fund provider or the loan provider, and at the same time the shareholders are the one who have invested, who have made the investment, who are the real owners of the company. And they basically, in the case of the supervisory board, you will also notice that the main bank intervene by way of strategic managers by deputing the strategic managers. Here at the top, the supervisory board is there, which subsequently define or which subsequently appoint the president, and president subsequently have the executive management, which is a kind of primarily a board of directors. And this particular board, with the help of or the support of the managers, manages the affair of the company. So in the case of Japanese model of corporate governance, banking and other financial institutions have important role in corporate board, as the Japanese companies raise significant part of capital through these banks and financial institutions. Since the banks and other institutions stakes are very high in businesses, they also work closely with the management of the company. In this particular model, you will also observe that along with the shareholders, the interest of lenders is recognized. And the fourth model that today we would like to consider is about the Indian model, which is a mix of, say, Anglo-American model and the German model. And in the case of Indian model of corporate governance, we can see three major type of companies: the private, public, and the public sector undertakings. Now, based on this consideration of corporate governance, we need to refer the major challenges which are faced and need to be discussed. First is the board appointments. Whether the board appointment is considering some sort of biasness or is it fair? So that somewhere defines the major challenge towards the corporate governance or the effectiveness of the corporate governance. The second aspect need to be considered as a major challenge is the performance evaluation of directors, both the executive and non-executive. Third is towards the appointment of independent directors, removal of the independent directors, provisions. in this particular case plays very important role. Accountability of the functionaries towards the important or the key stakeholders are also considered. Role of promoters and transparency issues also plays major important challenging role here. The conflict in organization and level of mistrust is also need to be addressed. Now we need to refer another unit, that is control, under which we will refer the strategic control process and the relevance, the importance of the strategic control in evolution, and some important methods which are used in control process will also be discussed, and the follow-up action for control. So the strategic control process, if we refer, is the process by which the top management needs to keep check on how well the strategy is being implemented to achieve the objectives of the organization. There are three major phases under which the strategic control process is closely referred. One is the evaluation criteria, second is performance evaluation, and third is control methods. So, if we broadly speaking see the process or the stages in the strategic control process, so five such stages are there which determine that the control can be ensured. First is by setting the control standards, and once the control standards have been set, then the actual performance is measured, and in the third step both these are compared, and based on the comparison, based on the comparing the actual performance and the control standards at the fourth stage, the reasons of those deviation can also be identified, and based on those reasons the fifth stage under strategic control process could be towards making necessary rectification or making corrective actions in this regard can be initiated. Now we need to refer the operational control under the controlling of the strategy, under which this basically ensures that specific tasks are performed effectively and efficiently. And if we refer some of the leading types of operational control, then it can include the financial control, budgeting aspect, management by objectives, and time controls. These are some of the tools one can refer. And briefly speaking, within financial control, one can refer DuPont's system of financial control, maybe different type of accounting ratios like return on investment, and maybe many more, just to have a financial control to address to. The second could be budgeting, which can be referred in terms of giving an idea of future expenditure and income, and it can also be classified maybe in terms of on the basis of time, monetary unit, function, or maybe based on the flexibility. The other control or operational control can be addressed through the help of management by objectives, MBO, where the objectives are established for the organization as a whole, for functional areas, departments, and finally individuals of the organization. The other type of control is time control. Commonly, two type of network analysis tools. One is program evaluation and review technique, PERT, and second is critical path method, CPM, is referred under the time control. Now, we also need to refer the performance standard, because the moment we refer the actual performance, then it need to be compared with the kind of standard set. So therefore, standards against which actual performance is to be measured is a performance standard. And it actually reflects the results that are expected when a work is performed satisfactorily in an organization. Three major type of performance standards are there. One is based on the kind of comparison of present performance, and and apart from that the past performance, and therefore that type of performance standard is termed as the historical standards. The other is industry standards. In that particular case, the comparison of the actual performance of the organization is compared or against the similar other organization in the same industry. But when we refer the present standards, so in that particular case, the goals are decided by the organization management to be achieved in a particular period. When we refer the analysis aspect from the point of view of follow-up action for the control, then this is very prominent in terms of once the actual operations start, the information about the actual performance has to be collected rigorously, periodically, and compared with the standard set as we have referred earlier in terms of the performance standards. And once it is compared, then actual performance on key success factors is, if found to be unsatisfactory, the long-term success of the strategy may be in danger. And therefore, two course of action are commonly possible in such scenario. One, that a responsibility center manager may be asked to improve performance, or if it is not possible, then target or standards of performance may be revised or revisited. Apart from that, the control system in terms of the strategy need to need, very commonly see or need to be observed some common problems. So some of those problems we can discuss very quickly, that there may not be consensus on the criteria for measuring the effectiveness and efficiency of the strategy. And apart from that, the reporting data may also not be a valid one. So that is another common problem noticed in the case of control system. The other aspect is the performance norms may be based on output on which the relevant business may not have a control. And very often, the performance standards may be set with inherent contradictions, and the employees may consider the system to be unfair and therefore may not accept it to the extent which is expected from them. And overemphasizing on measuring short-term performance may also make managers forget about the strategy, and which inherently has long connotations. And apart from that, it is also very difficult to set good, average, or say poor levels of performance in situations where the output are not very tangible. Four type of strategic controls are identified, because strategic control is a term that describes the process by which organizations control the formation and implementation of the strategies. So those four types are premise control, special alert control, implementation control, and strategic surveillance. Here, the premise control is the the concept which says that every strategy is founded on certain planning premises or assumptions. Therefore, premise control is intended to examine whether the premises on which a strategy is based are still valid or not. And if it is not valid, then those premises can be subsequently reviewed. The second type of strategic control is special alert control, and it's a kind of a particular alert control. In that case, the rigorous and quick reconsideration of an organization's plan in response to an unanticipated incident can be considered. The third type of strategic control is implementation control, which is further having two major forms. One is the strategic thrust, and the second is milestone reviews. Here, the strategic thrust is that basically give a kind of information that may be used to assess if the overall strategy is progressing as expected. And the milestone reviews is one way through which they track the strategy success at regular intervals. The fourth type of strategic control is the strategic surveillance, which is used in terms of monitoring a wide variety of events, both within the organization and outside the organization. that are likely to have an impact on the direction of the business strategy. The last unit we will be covering in terms of the evaluation of the strategy. Here, the process of evaluation need to be understand first, because the successful strategy is the effective implementation and the evaluation system, and therefore it is very necessary for the management to have a continuous evaluation, review uh, system, and which should be based on the corrective action can also be taken if that process of evaluation is 100% accurate. So the process of evaluation is relied on two major aspects: the effectiveness and the efficiency. The effectiveness is measured by the degree to which the organization has achieved its objectives, while the efficiency refers to the manner of a resource utilization for achieving the output. Now, we also need to refer the business portfolio analysis, because the moment we are talking about the review after the implementation of the strategy, then the portfolio analysis helps us in terms of understanding whether the strategies implemented are achieving the objective or are able to meet out the organizational objective or not. So, from that perspective, the portfolio analysis is an analysis of the corporation as a portfolio of different businesses with the objective of managing it for returns on its resources. Here, the manager analyzes the future implications of their present resource allocation and continuously evaluates which operations or products to expand or add, or in contrary to that, which ones to be curtailed or disposed of. So if we refer some common business portfolio analysis or the tools available to it, then commonly speaking, 4 to 5 such types of business portfolio analysis are available. One is the BCG's growth share matrix. Second is McKinsey matrix, which is also known as G strategic business planning grid. Third is strategic planning institute metrics. Fourth is R30 Little Organizations metrics. And fifth is Hoffer's product market evolution metrics. So we will be referring one of the prominent BCG growth share metrics over here. That is that is considering two major factors. One is the market share. From this axis, from this 2 by 2 matrix, you can easily see that market share component is there in the visual, and at the same time the other is the market growth rate. So very commonly you will notice that a company, an organization is having different products or different ventures under which it is working. So if they need to emphasize upon a specific type of venture over the other, or just to make a kind of comparative analysis, then from that point of view, which venture is more important over the other, maybe from different portfolio perspective. So this type of metrics, BCG growth share metrics, portfolio analysis helps such organization, which is having four such component, where depending on the market growth rate, whether it is high or low, and at the same time the other counterpart is market share position of the company or its portfolio position, whether it is high or low. Four such situation may arise. One is the star, which means the the high position of the market share, and at the same time the high position of the market growth rate. And on the other hand, if we refer the cash cow position, then it is somewhere where the market share is high in the market, but at the same time the growth rate in the market is low. So this is one such situation which helps in terms of sharing kind of ability to fund the question marks or the star, where more growth prospect is required, where the the cow can help in terms of generating the funds and helping out the ventures to grow more. The question mark is one such stage where the market growth rate is high, but at the same time, the market share of the firm is low. So, in that case, if the firm is trying to explore the new ventures, so that might be very risky, and few maybe few become stars, or maybe other divested options might not be available. And the fourth type of option is the dogs, where the market share is low, and at the same time the market growth rate is also low, so is low. So in that particular case, in that particular situation, the divestment option is somewhere advised as a part of the strategy. Since we have reached to the last part of our discussion of block 4, so we will have to sum up in terms of some of the prominent characteristics of the effective evolution strategy. So around six or five major characteristics have been identified. First, the activities of evolution must be economical in nature. Third, in fact, second, the informational should neither be too much, or it should not be too little. So it should have a kind of balanced approach in that case. The control should neither be too much nor too less. So again, the control have to be balanced in that scenario. The other is the evolution activities should relate to the organization's objectives. And last, it should be designed in such a manner so that a true picture is portrayed. So, with this discussion, I hope you must have learned a lot in this MMPC 12 course of MBA. So, we will meet again with some new topic. Thank you very much.